Hello and welcome to Dataversity Talks, a podcast where we discuss with industry leaders and experts how they have built their careers around data. I'm your host, Shannon Kemp, and today we're talking to Aaron Wilkerson, the Senior Manager of Data Strategy and Governance at Carh.
Ready to share your knowledge and network with your data peers? Join us in San Diego this June for the Data Governance and Information Quality Conference. 5 days packed full of new perspectives, new colleagues, and new approaches are yours when you register at dgiq2023west.dataversity.net. Lock in early bird savings when you register by May 5th. We'll see you there.
Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp and I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Dataversity, and this is My Career in Data, a Dataversity Talks podcast dedicated to learning from those who have careers in data management, to understand how they got there, and to be talking with people who help make those careers a little bit easier. To keep up to date in the latest in data management education, go to dataversity.net/subscribe. And today we are joined by Aaron Wilkerson, the Senior Manager of Data Strategy and Governance at Carh. And normally this is where a podcast host would read a short bio of the guest, but in this podcast, your bio is what we're here to talk about. Aaron, hello and welcome.
Hello, Shannon. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. Happy to be involved with this.
I'm so excited. So you're the Senior Manager of Data Strategy and Governance at Carh. So what is Carh, for those who don't know, and what is it that you do?
Yep. So the mission statement of Carh is that we exist to serve and protect hardworking people. So we are a apparel, fashion, and retail brand, headquartered in Dearborn, Michigan. We have about 5,500 associates worldwide. We have, our company has a very proud history. We're a family company, so the original founder founded the company back, I believe, in 1889. Still kind of housed within the family, definitely a private company. So, we're a maker of workwear plus. A lot of people know the Carhartt jacket, the Carhartt overalls, the brown duck coats and things like that. So, we also have the hats. I think that's one of the most popular hats. I think I've heard that the T-shirt. So the Carhartt T-shirt, a little pocket T-shirt, I think is the most popular T-shirt in America. So a lot of different products that people have known us for I think over 130 plus years. So definitely, it's a pretty cool company to work for. I'm based out of just outside of Detroit, Michigan. So I'm a lifelong Michigander. So the company is also, very close to me where I live at. So I've always, liked working for local companies. So, very awesome mission for the company. Plus, local Michigan company is kind of what attracted me to the role. So I'm, been with the company for about 6 months now. So my range of responsibility is really around governance. So trying to help establish a lot of governance practices for the company. And also, have some responsibilities in the, data architecture space and kind of to, bring about some data strategy as well. So very fun job, still very new to the company, but, been able to kind of dig around and kind of figure out where I can make a impact.
Well, I love it. And with a company that old, I'm guessing you deal with a lot of legacy systems and legacy practices that you're working to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of it, there's a true love of the brand by the associates here. So you have people that have been here for a very long time. Some people have been here 20 plus years. So people have that history. But there's also a good amount of people similar to me that just arrived within the past, 6 months to 1 year. So a lot of new energy. I would say that the company has faced a lot of growth. So, going from, continuing to grow in size and kind of, revenue, year over year, decade over decade, that kind of brings about new opportunities because of course you can't, when you, go well over $1 billion, at company size, there's a difference in kind of how you run a $500 million company versus $1 billion company. So definitely a lot of change in terms of our systems, processing. That's why I'm here to kind of help with governance, just because as you continue to grow and grow, there's some different structures and systems and processes have to be in place to kind of help with that growth. So definitely, a lot of kind of older different things in place that we're trying to freshen and make new. One of our mantras is power the seamless customer experience, just to kind of make sure we keep the customers front of mind and make sure that we're kind of doing things to make it easier for our customers to work with Carhartt.
Very nice. So tell me, Erin, when you were very young in elementary school, was this the dream? I'm going to grow up and be a senior manager of data strategy and governance.
No, of course not. But I think back to when I was in fifth grade, I think I put like a baseball player, like a computer programmer. So definitely the baseball, I kind of maxed out of that, I think, in 11th grade. So I guess I'm kind of sort of a computer programmer since I kind of work in the data space. So yeah, definitely kind of didn't really imagine this. I mean, I was very much into kind of engineering and robotics, even like thinking about high school. So definitely a big shift kind of getting to the data space that I have my whole career.
I love it. So, so tell me, so as you were growing up then, so staying into, it sounds like a lot of computers, as growing up in high school, and what was the focus? Where did you go from there? Where did your passion start taking you?
I mean, I would say that, I even put this in my LinkedIn profile. Curiosity, I would say, is a big part of my journey. So I would say that I've always kind of leaned on the STEM fields. 'Cause I was always very good at kind of math. So I know I did some kind of engineering programs back when I was in high school. So kind of follow engineering just because I feel like that was kind of a good thing for curiosity, because you're always kind of building and tinkering around with things. So kind of follow the engineering path. So actually that's what I got my bachelor's degree in, was kind of electrical engineering. But then I realized that I wasn't going to be an engineer. Like I had a lot of peers who were big into kind of engineering. I realized I didn't want to do that. So I ended up kind of working for Accenture as in the consulting world. So my first job that I got when I joined Accenture out of college was in IT. So I joined kind of a data like service desk or help desk at a client right out of college, and learned kind of everything on the job. So learned about IT and servers, and this was back when it was all like physical machines before we got into virtual, before cloud. So like how to build out security structures on servers, and how to build out software, install software. So definitely just curious, right? Just learning, just constantly learning, constantly being challenged, is kind of finding, like, digging in more into the whys, right? So why are we doing it this way? Like, okay, why are we doing it this way? Are there different opportunities to do that? So I would just say that the curiosity has just been a natural progression along my career, just kind of taking the next level more and more, to understand more and to kind of work more front of office, because I typically like to work with people, like engaging, problem solving, talking with people, understanding their challenges, solutioning, so coming up with solutions to their problems. I've been very much more front office versus back office. So it's kind of like, how do I get in front of people and problem solve and kind of continue kind of the curiosity journey? So that's kind of led me for the past, I don't know, going on 16 years of my career.
Very nice. So tell me a little bit more about that journey. So you started off at Accenture and almost immediately got into data, it sounds like, and even though in some IT support fashion, right? So tell me a little bit more about your data journey. Where'd you go from there?
Yeah. So back when I started, luckily I've been in data my entire career. So that was like my first job. So I was in more of a service desk. So now it's on SAP, but before SAP bought it, I was very much involved with business objects. So very much into reporting. So I was on a team that was more of a service desk, where like when people had security issues, we were like trying to fix their security access because they couldn't access reports. Also, we had like all these jobs, so we were running all these different like reporting jobs. So we were kind of making sure that our reporting queue was going. Anytime there was an error, we were kind of rebooting software or reinstalling. So learned a lot about how to how to install applications, how to configure applications. Because this is before everything was more cloud-based. It was actually like installing applications on a server, clustering applications together. You always wanted like the tolerance. So you want to make sure that the servers are all connected to each other. So a lot of that. So I really dug into the business object side of it. But then the recession happened in 2008. So I was consulting. So they let a lot of the consultants go. So then I took those specialized skills in business objects, and that got me into a different consulting gig. So I ended up traveling for about 6 months to a company in Boston, leave Monday morning and then kind of come back home Thursday and do it. So I did that for about 6 months, like still focused on business objects as a technology. And then, met my soon-to-be wife, we got engaged, and I didn't want to travel anymore. So then ended up kind of taking that business objects and working for a hospital. So a local hospital, I ended up kind of being their kind of business objects administrator. So taking that kind of same tech stack that I learned from my first job to different roles. And then at the time, my director came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to work on ETL?" I never heard of ETL. At that time, I was just all about like business objects, like data and reporting administration. I'd not really done anything like actual like movement of data. So then I learned on the job about ETL and data warehousing. So I had some pretty cool managers that were my mentors. So learned a lot about ETL and data warehousing, what data warehouse was. So then kind of merged my role into kind of more data warehousing. So learned more about ETL, became kind of an ETL developer. Then kind of got more curious and learned about the architecture side of it. So then kind of leaned more into data architecture and ETL architecture. Because I was wondering, like, why are we creating queries this way? Why are we kind of, why is the database structured this way? Why are tables and indexes built this way? So it kind of like took the curiosity and more of the architecture. Then kind of bounced around and ended up kind of getting into leadership, because I found that usually architects kind of lead itself into leadership. So then started to take on manager roles. So about 9 years ago, kind of had my first manager role. So still kind of had part architecture, part people management side of it. So still taking the data route into data warehousing and like the front end reporting. So kind of did a couple roles on the data leadership side for a couple years. Then, got an opportunity at my current company to come here. So then it was more of I've done the data warehousing, done the business intelligence for a long time. What about like governance? I've done some governance in my entire career, but never like more like that was my core role, is like governance and then more of the strategy. Because I realized that, even as we build the backend data warehouse and BI reporting, there's still like a level of governance and strategy that needs to be there too. Because I think a lot of the challenge we have in our space is just kind of people don't really understand the end-to-end parts around how they put data into a system that comes out on the backend side, or the strategy around like, how does this align to the business, or how are we providing business value with these things? So I've worked on the backend side where I create these data warehouses reports, but then connect like, why does the business need this? Are there better ways to do this? So really followed the strategy kind of around through curiosity, just kind of getting in front of it. So that's kind of like my journey from kind of really back in, administration to like data warehousing, through architecture, through manager and leadership, and kind of, where I am now. So kind of still on the curiosity side of just like being curious and wanting to address problems and finding new solutions to things.
I love that. So let me just back it up a little bit, because so many of our listeners are new to the space and are looking to get into these kind of roles. So business objects, how do you define that? How are you defining that when you talked about getting into that?
So that was a reporting tool. So in data, like there's different roles within data. So you have kind of the people who kind of create the databases, because typically reporting is on top of a data set. Usually those data sets you're pulling data from different applications and you're storing them in a database, but people want access to see the data. So a lot of people use Excel, but there are formal tools. Like you've heard of Tableau, you've heard of Power BI. So Business Objects was a reporting tool. It was eventually acquired by SAP and they renamed it, but it was a reporting tool that essentially sat on top of a database where you have a data model and then you kind of created a report on top of that. So it was kind of a tool that helped people easily create reports that you can go and give off to like your leader, different business people in the business. So it's kind of like a more of a reporting tool to kind of provide. So the things that you do in Excel, it allowed you to kind of do that a little bit faster at scale when you had like kind of like more of a backend database to expose data to.
Then ETL, you said you didn't know what an ETL was, and then using your curiosity discovered what that was in a data warehouse.
Correct. Yep. So that, ETL stands for extract, transform, or load. So it's essentially how you build the database, right? So, you have data sitting in different databases. You need to extract that, right? So you have to pull the data out, you have to transform it, you have to load it into your target like end result, because you don't want to have reports sitting on top of the data where it came from. You want to move that data from one place to the next one. So that essentially is the ETL, is kind of the movement from data from one place to the next place so that people can analyze it. Because typically, like, you don't want people touching like the actual application because they could break it, there's performance issues. So you typically want to move it somewhere else, then let them create reports on top of that, because you won't break it. It's usually going to have faster performance. So that was part of that, is just kind of moving data from one place to the next. And the architecture is like trying to design how that structure should be made. So while it's kind of like the engineer versus kind of the construction worker, where the engineer is going to design what the building should look like, but you actually have the construction work to actually build it. They're laying down the cement, they're putting up the framing, they're putting up the drywall, but someone kind of architects and says like, here's the layout and here's the plans. Now someone has to actually go build that. So they kind of changed the names, right? So now I think you hear more about like data engineers. They kind of, when I was there, it was kind of more ETL developers or database developers, but now it's kind of called data engineers. So we've kind of rebranded it, but it's the same kind of concept where you're moving data from one place to the next, and you may kind of transform it in some way.
I love it.
More and more companies are considering investing in data literacy education, but still have questions about its value, purpose, and how to get the ball rolling. Introducing the newest monthly webinar series from Dataversity, Elevating Enterprise Data Literacy, where we discuss the landscape of data literacy and answer your burning questions. Learn more about this new series and register for free at dataversity.net.
Lots of things for me to come back to there, but so what is your definition of data and how do you work with it?
Yeah, it's interesting because that was actually just a topic on LinkedIn. So data is, it's the thing that kind of describes our business, right? So it describes our products, right? So if we make, a t-shirt, it gives you like, it's a t-shirt, it's this length by this length, it weighs this much, it has this color, it costs this much. It's also kind of the output of our processes, right? So if we're going to, ship a t-shirt to my house, that, it came from this location, it got put on this truck, it took this many days, it ended up at my house. So like, it's all those different it's the information about a process that you get to follow along with, right? So, like where it came from, where it sat at, how long it took. So it's kind of like it's the information, it's the context about our business, about our customers. So they know that, my name, first name, last name, address, like, so that information. So it's kind of that information that that's about our company, it's about our business, about our services. So it's really like that actual, tangible thing that you can use to track, your company, the value you provide, the product, services, the relationships. Like, it's that kind of information that you can use to understand our business or understand a product or understand something else like that.
And I love to ask people who are especially in data governance. What is data governance to you? We've had so many people come to us and say, "Oh, data governance is such a dirty word. We don't want data governance. It's all about adhering to laws and this and that." So, what is data governance to you, and how do you implement it?
I mean, to me, to your point, it really depends on your industry. I think it's typically those it's people, process, technology, right? It's those type of people and process or technology around how we utilize data, right? So every company has data. The question is like, how to use it. Where does it come from? Where does it go to? Who has access to it? How do we, know what the guidelines around, like, how are we supposed to handle it? Are there certain business specific rules around how we should name things? So it's kind of like the structure and kind of the framework around which we use data, because if you view it as like a true asset, it's really like, how do you treat that asset within your company? So governance is really just kind of that. It's the people, process, and technology that's wrapped around how we utilize data. We can talk about policies, you can talk about security, you can talk about regulations, compliance, but those are just more different shades of it. But it's just like, it's more of the, like, how do we use data and like, how do we think about how it's managed and used around the organization?
I really like that answer. And tell me a little bit about data strategy. You know, what are you thinking about when you're working on a data strategy for the Carhartt?
So I would say data strategy kind of gets into um like it's I would it's kind of interesting. The strategy, I think, is more like, how do you leverage a strength against a weakness? So it's kind of like, what's our approach to leveraging data to benefit the organization? So we believe that data has value. So it's like, what are those different opportunities and approaches to do that, right? Because you have many opportunities around, like, what you can do with data, but strategy is like, what are we choosing to do and we choose not to do? So you could sell data, you could send data to different customers, but you're making decisions to not do certain things with data. So strategy kind of helps you align with, like, we're using data for this, we're not using data for that. Like data, so in our realm, like, data is going to this system and this system is not going to this system. So it's really that kind of like actual like action plan and more of a decision-making tool to say, hey, we think that this is the best use of data for value creation, and this is how we plan to use that at this company. So it's not about technology, right? So like Power BI, SQL, Oracle, that's not a strategy. Those are tools, those are enablers for a strategy, but it's not a strategy. The strategy is a very specific around, like, this is what we're choosing to do to leverage data in our organization for these different benefits.
Very nice. So do you see the importance of data management and the number of jobs working with data increasing or decreasing over the next 10 years, and why?
I would say it really depends on the organization. I would say that if you have a company that truly views data as like an enabler of business value, you're going to see the number of jobs increasing, because we just know that there's going to be more data. Like digital was a huge digital transformation is a huge enabler of data. So like when you see, like, more companies through the pandemic, like using their e-commerce or apps, like all those things are creating data. So you need people that know how to manage and utilize that data. But the business has to have the overarching kind of belief and vision that this data will provide value to organizations. So if the business says that, yeah, this data has value, you're going to see the number of data jobs increasing, because that someone has to be able to manage and use that. But we've also seen, especially during this kind of last couple months of the economy, is that you see people reducing the data team. So I think that's because the business doesn't believe that data has value, or have not seen the value as maybe more of a cost center than an asset of innovation. So I would say it really depends on the company. I would say that, like, a lot of the leading companies, you see that data jobs are growing because they know that they need more people to manage data. But some companies you see it shrinking because the executives are like, we've invested millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars. We've not seen any benefit from this. So they're reducing data jobs. So I really think it just depends on, like, if you're a growth company that's like much more visionary, or like you just don't see data as a differentiator for your company.
Very interesting. So what advice would you give to people looking to get into a career in data management?
I would say my advice is that, while data is important, we really need to focus on the business, because I think the challenge is a lot of times data is like, it started, I think, very much back office and IT, but we've seen that it's really growing even out of IT in certain aspects, in terms of we need to understand how the business wants to use it and the value that it creates, right? So we should know more about the business. So I would say my advice usually is, like, learn about how a business makes money, how the business creates value. So the business model, the operating model. So if you understand how the business makes money, how does it actually provide that value? So if you work for, a fast food company, do you know, like, how how the store works, how the workers, like, create the food, how do they distribute the food, the supply chain, how does the food come in, like, where does it come from, how does it come in so quickly? So, like, as you understand more about the business model and operating model, even the technology model, right? So, like, how do we efficiently kind of send information? How do we have technology to handle these things? Like, how does the POS, the ordering system works? As you understand that, that gives you a much better understanding around how we should utilize data. because data is used as a enabler of business value. But the problem is a lot of times we don't associate the business value. So we treat data like in its own like lane, like as like a isolated island. But the data is there to benefit the business. So I think that's where I would advise people is that you have to make the connection to the business, or else you kind of, like I said before, like the business doesn't see value. So if you don't connect to the business value, the business will say, we don't understand why we have all these people doing this data stuff, and they won't invest in you. They won't give you more resources. They won't give you more people or give you more tools. And then you kind of eventually kind of wither away, you kind of get reduced. So that would be my advice is kind of, follow the people, follow the business. I mean, you can learn tools like, you can learn SQL, you can learn about databases. I learned that out of college. So I'll say, but the learning how to talk to business users, understand their problems, understand their challenges, that's the key, I think, in the data space. I think more people should focus on.
I love it. So is there something that you've done? Is it just practice talking to people? Is there some education? Is there some reading materials that you've kept up on to really keep that engagement going and understanding of the business?
I would say a lot of it is curious, is asking questions, right? So it's showing up and asking people questions and understanding their roles, right? So if someone's asking you for something, like understand how they're incentivized, right? So if it's a business person, like for example, marketing, okay, if someone's asking you for marketing data, like what are you going to use with it? Then once you have the data, what would you do with that? Okay, I would do this. Okay, then after you do that, what are you going to do with that? Like understand their incentives, because we all have incentives around why we do things. So we talk with someone in sales, understand, okay, if they're asking for this data, they're going to use it to make a decision. Okay, then walk us through your decision-making processes. So like a lot of it's kind of workflows, we're just asking questions. I can, there's always kind of book. The best thing is just ask questions and be curious and kind of just keep engaging people. Even if you don't work with the business, ask your leader, right? If your leader is asking you to do something, okay, hey, why is that important? Or what are you going to do with that? Like, how is that going to benefit you? Like, it's really just kind of expanding the curiosity and just kind of more asking questions and listening, right? So that's the key, is also listening. So don't ask with the intent to kind of have an answer right away. It's like sometimes you just sit there and listen, you write it down. And I think that's kind of from the basics. I think it's practice, because no one's great when you first start. You don't know what questions to ask. You don't know the follow, because there's always follow-up, right? So someone can give you the answer, but it's typically a follow-up question. That's the next question you need to ask, but you really don't learn that until you get in the habit. So I would say that, start by being curious, ask questions, be comfortable talking with people. So that's another one, just kind of like, are you approachable? Do people enjoy talking with you? Like, make sure that you're someone that people want to work with.
That's such great advice. And I love that you've carried that be curious theme through most of your life, and has served you so well in your career. So any other advice or skill sets? I mean, you talked, how do you keep up on the technical aspects of that you need to keep up with? I assume now in a more leadership role, you're not having to learn the coding on, very specific products all the time, but how are you keeping up to date to keep the company up to date for the data management?
Yeah, I would say, LinkedIn has been huge for me. So I would say going on to LinkedIn, like, Googling like top data thought leaders, and then kind of following them on LinkedIn and following what they're talking about. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about data and LinkedIn. So I think it's just kind of like listening, like watching people, what they talk about. Like there's always articles. There's tons of articles. There's tons of newsletters, podcasts, like look up data podcasts. So I would say the information is everywhere. You just need to kind of plug in and pick something, right? So like I said, there's podcasts, there's webinars, conferences are good. So you can like go to a conference and spend some time there. So you can kind of get a feel for, what's out there in the space. Then you kind of have to filter to figure out what makes sense. Because sometimes there's things that doesn't make sense. So then you kind of challenge and say, okay, that makes sense to me. That doesn't make sense to me. YouTube's another one where there's always all kind of YouTube. So I'll say the information is everywhere. Like I think we're in the age where you can learn anything you want to if you put the time in. So I would say you just have to commit to putting the time in, and then just kind of picking a lane. So maybe you focus on LinkedIn for a couple months, then you pivot to like podcasts. You're going to follow podcasts, and then take those recommendations, and then you're going to try YouTube videos, and you have to apply it, right? So that's the other thing, is you can listen all day until you actually like try it. And we also live in there's tons of free trials, tons of free software out there. So I would say listen, but then you have to practice it and try it out. So that's the step 2 is 1, listen and learn, and then you have to actually apply it to problems, right? So there's always kinds of data sets out there, or create a data set. But I would say it's a pretty cool age to be around because, like I said, there's information everywhere, and it's easy to learn and pick up skills.
Such great advice. Thank you so much. Okay, so the most important question of the interview here, Aaron. What's your favorite baseball team?
Ugh, I don't really watch baseball. I would say
Not anymore. You wanted.
I would say probably the Detroit Tigers because they're local to me, but they're not. They've not been very good lately. So, Tigers,
so you
unfortunately,
lost that passion a little bit since a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. And for all of our listeners out there, if you'd like to keep up to date in the latest podcasts and in the latest data management education, you may go to dataversity.net/subscribe. Until next time. Thank you for listening to Dataversity Talks, brought to you by Dataversity. Subscribe to our newsletter for podcast updates and information about our free educational articles, blogs, and webinars at dataversity.net/subscribe.